I'm with an organization called Choices for Youth in St. John's, Newfoundland, and we provide shelter, outreach, and supportive housing services to youth. So for us, the areas of research that we choose to get involved with are those areas obviously particular to youth, but also obviously tied to our existing needs around whether it's evaluation or emerging needs that we're seeing in the community that we don't have enough information on. I think for us, if you take an overall view of, the value of research to nonprofits, service providers, is that we've identified that we need to get better at having the right information for ourselves. In some cases, yes, it is about accountability to government, accountability to funders, but that's kind of the minimal level of expectation of what can be accomplished. For us, really, it has become about setting a much higher standards. Is that long before government would potentially make use of that kind of information, I want to make sure that we are making decisions around program development and direction for our organization that's based on really good knowledge of what's happening in the community. For us right now, we've set priorities around mental health issues among youth, not only in St. John's, but we're part of the EVA's initiative's National Learning Community on Youth Homelessness. And that's a learning community of 11 agencies across the country have been meeting for the last 3 years around youth homelessness. And at our last meeting, we have identified that for all of us and all of our communities, seeing significant issues around mental health, for the youth that we're serving. So one of the things that we're looking at right now is launching a national research project that would begin to, provide a bit of a scan, if you want to call it that, in terms of the scope of the issues among youth, but also the capacity of communities to respond appropriately and what the gaps in service are. So that's one area that we're looking at. Locally in St. John's, some of the other things that we're currently involved with, we're through Memorial University, is a study that is looking at residential treatment options in our community. Again, for the very same reasons, locally, it's becoming very evident that it's having a significant impact on our youth, and the study is really going to take into consideration, very similar to the project on a national scale, a needs assessment in the community, an analysis of the system, and certainly what the gaps are, and then recommendations around those models that exist that can be incorporated into our community. So that's another significant project for us. Another area, which is somewhat of a crossover with the mental health piece, is a very similar study around addictions and addiction treatment options in our community. So we, in partnership with the provincial government, are taking on a research project which will once again look at doing somewhat of a needs assessment in our community around drug and alcohol issues for youth, kind of the emerging trends, a bit of a scan of the system in terms of what is and is not working, but also then some recommendations around what the residential treatment options should look like, what the long-term support options should look like. So that's the stuff, real hardcore stuff that on the ground can translate into programming options for youth, in hopefully the very near future. I think, we've heard here at this conference in Calgary that, talking about the disconnect between policymakers and researchers and service providers. There's kind of a real group of three that ultimately are all trying to impact on a lot of the same issues, but they're disconnected in terms of how they make decisions, how they set priorities in particular. One of the interesting aspects of that, I would argue, that service providers are also decision makers. So there's a little addition I would add to that in terms of, organizations make decisions all the time that have a direct impact on what's happening in many communities across the country. So just to kind of make that point, but ultimately it takes all three of those groups to be at, hopefully the same table early on in processes around trying to address needs in the community. Because ultimately you're talking about all the same issues, and in many cases the same, in the case of youth, the same young person is being targeted by all three in terms of trying to fix whatever the identified problem is. So the earlier you can get those three groups at the same table making decisions, I think you'll, substantial difference in terms of what some of the outcomes can be.